everyone to a call for judgment. Today's show, I want to talk about the banking collapse. In the last month, there have been 3 banks that have collapsed. This affects everybody, whether you work, whether you live with your parents, whether you're in high school. Listening to this video, it affects you because it has everything to do with all of us, because we all function, whether you pay a mortgage, whether you buy groceries, I'm sure in some way, shape, or form, whether you have money or don't, money will affect your life. Now, I'm not talking about worshiping money. I'm talking about needing money to survive. Now, the banking collapse is crucial in Agenda 2030 in the New World Order. It is not getting enough attention because what's happening here, and this is why it's so important to understand about communism, is that we have this woke movement. The woke movement is the communist movement. And the people who are in charge are the Democrats. The Democrats and the Republicans are working together to do this. That's why you don't see any Republican pushback. You just hear a lot of talking heads yelling back and forth, putting on a show, putting on a charade. When in fact, when you're elected in this country to be represented, a representative as the president or be a politician or whatever, you're supposed to come in and you're supposed to have ideas and things like this, and you're supposed to change this or that. But there's nothing in the world that says you're supposed to come in and you're supposed to destroy capitalism and the system that's in place. But that's what they want to do. So, but to do that, they have to create chaos. So all you hear the politicians talk about is the most nonsensical, ridiculous topics, right? We're talking about men having babies. We're talking about who can use what bathroom. While they're doing that and distracting people so they argue and waste their time and energy every day debating, getting angry about nonsense, they're destroying the entire system and sabotaging it. So we have another bank collapsing, and it's barely getting any press. This is going to continue to happen. The small banks are going to be eaten up by the big banks. So in other words, if you have a small regional bank in your town, say you live in John Doesville, and your money is in that bank, get ready for your money not to be in that bank. They are putting the banks under. And there's going to be one centralized bank. That's how it works in a communist system. Take a look at what just occurred today.
We're back with some breaking news this morning. First Republic Bank has been taken over by federal regulators and sold to JP Morgan Chase. This comes after regulators spent the weekend trying to find a buyer for the bank.
Yeah, beginning today, 84 First Republic branches will reopen under JP Morgan Chase. This makes it now the third major bank to go under in less than 2 months. The First Republic closure has now become the second largest bank failure in U.S. history, surpassing Silicon Valley Bank. For more, we're joined by Barron's reporter Megan Casella. Megan, good morning to you. So at the time of the closure, First Republic had assets worth more than $229 billion, and that is even more than Silicon Valley, which had $209 billion at the time of its closure. So what are your takeaways here?
It's not an unfamiliar story, right? We're seeing this happen again, what we saw in March, that, depositors were spooked by some of that turmoil. They went to withdraw their money. This mid-sized bank had a large number of uninsured deposits, over $250,000. These depositors said, this isn't a too big to fail bank. I want to get my money out. We saw last week that there were signs of that happening, that First Republic had lost a huge number of its deposits, and so it was looking for outside help. We knew there was going to have to be an end to this story, and so federal regulators stepped in over the weekend. JP Morgan stepped in. They're hoping that this contains the crisis, but of course it does spook investors. But I will say government officials, federal regulators have emphasized that they do think that this is contained to a small number of banks that were not likely to see this spread.
So that's 3 banks that have gone under in a month. And still, the stuff that gets talked about is all this stuff about pronouns and people's feelings, and that's how communism works. They're playing into a certain audience that they have weakened and made emotionally vulnerable and pretending like they're there to support them so that they could be a line of defense between people like us who are trying to call out what they're doing, because this affects all of us. So if you don't understand why the banks have to collapse, for starters, climate agenda, which is linked into the ESG, right? You might be like, what is that? I don't understand. The carbon footprint, right? They pretend it has to do with the climate. So all the banks are going to track your carbon footprint to make sure that you're being environmentally friendly. What this has to do with is enslavement, financial enslavement. This is what happens in China. If you disagree with the Chinese government, they will freeze your bank account. We just saw it in Canada last year with the truckers thing, right? If you disagree with the Chinese government or you say things negatively on social media, they will not just freeze your bank account, they will limit where you can go and how you can travel. This all has to do with the electric vehicles, it has to do with the carbon emissions. It is all a scam. And the banks are going to be at the center of this because the banks are going to control your life because they're going to control what you can and can't do. And they're going to do that by controlling what you can and cannot say, which is part of what they're doing now by deceiving the liberal, weak-minded people out there into censoring free speech because of people's feelings and emotions, because it starts with hate speech, which is a made-up thing, and then it starts filtering down into what you can and can't say. And it goes from, oh, well, it used to just be you couldn't say certain words about certain races. And then 2 years later, it's, oh, you can and cannot say this about certain political parties or certain political figures. And it continues to filter to the point where people are afraid to speak, and especially speak out against the system because they don't want their bank accounts frozen and they don't want to be stuck somewhere where their electric vehicles shut off by Big Brother because they suddenly were out speaking against Big Brother, and Big Brother was listening because they're listening on all these devices. This is how the controlled system works. This is why they're hell-bent on shutting all of our voices down right now as they push this forward. Because if people start to see whether you're Republican or Democrat, that both political parties are working together to divide us and distract us while they sabotage this system. Look at all this stuff happening at once. All this chaos happening at once. It's insanity. You can name every single agenda that people like me have talked about for the last decade that was going to happen, right? A pandemic, a banking collapse, civil unrest, civil war, food crisis, water crisis. All these things are occurring, and that's just to name a few. And, of course, the mental health crisis and what 5G is doing to people. Nobody sees what's happening because they're silencing everybody who's talking out against it. So the banking collapse has to happen because the big banks who are going to scoop up and eat up these smaller banks are the ones who are implementing the carbon footprint, right? I covered this last year. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase Manhattan, Citibank. These huge banks are going to swoop in on the smaller banks, forcing everyone into the big banks. So you won't have an option to go, hey, I don't want anything to do with this carbon emission, carbon footprint tracking system. I'm going to go into John Doe Bank. We're not going to be allowed to because John Doe Bank's not going to exist. And it's either going to be, well, you have to get into these big banks. And then you might go, well, I won't get into any bank. But you're going to have to, with some type of digital currency, be involved in the big banks. Now, the digital currency isn't going to be here yet, even though they're rolling it out in July, which I covered last year as well. But what they're going to do is make it almost impossible for you to buy things without having some type of digital representation. So you might say, well, I won't buy anything online anymore. Well, they're going to make it so when you go to storefronts, the small, the ones that remain, because they're putting all storefronts out of business, when you go to the storefronts, that you still can't use cash at the storefronts. I've covered this for years now. More and more stores, Subway, etc., not accepting cash. Somebody posted on my website, which I can't say the name of the website here, on my website, which I'm sure you all know, about how certain stores were having people go into the store and put their cash inside of a machine. So they put their cash in the machine, and the machine gives them a card back, and there's money on the card, and then they could go through the store and make their purchase instead of just going up to the cashier with a $20 bill. They want you to get so used to not having cash that you're actually giving up your cash for a card, and they'll give you a little bonus if you give when you give your $20, you get $21 on the card. Yay! They're taking the cash and then they're not recirculating the cash. You see how this whole thing is working? So they're going to freeze people out of this system. And this is so crucial for people to understand. Climate change is the biggest scam that's ever existed. Anything that's going on with the climate is because they're doing it. Whether it's HAARP or it's chemtrailing or it's CERN. They're creating this stuff. They've had the ability to do this with earthquakes, with weather manipulation like Operation Popeye for a long period of time. The chemtrailing has never been worse. I'm not saying that some of the climate's not affected, but it's affected because they're doing it deliberately. Okay? And they're not even doing a good job at it because they're barely convincing anyone. But nothing is happening because we're walking around breathing. The carbon they want to neutralize and terminate is us. Okay? And they want to be able to track and monitor you and imprison you in your home. The last event that occurred around the world that still some people believe is going on because you see them walking around as if it is. That last event was a test for lots of different reasons. But they wanted to see how many people would use social distancing, how many people would quarantine themselves in their homes, because they're going to be imprisoned in your home. There's not enough prison. They can't make prisons for every single person in the world, all the billions of people. So they're going to trick you to imprison yourself in your home. Inside your home, you have all the technology that records and monitors you already. Okay, and all that stuff, people are like, I don't know what happened to that. Nobody's listening. It goes right to the NSA, right to the government. And you might say, well, I'm not saying anything bad. Well, they're listening to you, and even when you start questioning the government, you're like, I don't like this. They're they're limiting where I can go with my car all of a sudden. Oh, you're going to get doxxed for it. You're going to have money taken out of your account. You're going to have your accounts frozen, and you're going to be told where you can and can't go. And this all connects to this banking collapse. So to wrap all this up with a bow, as you see these banks continue to crumble, right? The government comes out and they go, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Let's talk about it. Men can have babies, and let's talk about all these things. So they drive people nuts. And then the Republicans in power just go on TV like celebrities, and they're like, all this woke nonsense. It's communism. Okay? Let's stop calling it woke. It's communism. If they were out there calling it communism woke or just communism, then people go, wait, I don't even understand what that means. Can we talk about it? They've renamed communism as the woke movement to deceive people, to deceive liberals. Because if they hear communism, they're like, wait a minute, I'm not a commie. Communism, we've heard all about communism over the years, how dangerous and how bad it is, and how the dictatorships. I mean, we've heard about it. We see it with China. So they call it woke here. And they say, oh, well, this movement is about love, and we all love one another. And then when this is in place, they are going to curb stomp all of the people who supported them, because they don't give a crap about you. They're using you to bring and usher this in. They're putting you as a wall of defense between conservatives and them. Most conservatives who are awake, right? I'm not a conservative because I don't believe in the left-right. I don't believe that this is a republic anymore. I don't believe your vote counts. I've said that for years. I don't support Trump. I think he's one of them. They're all actors who are socially engineering people through psychological operations. It's all psychological. So while they distract you from this, they're destroying the value of the dollar. They're destroying the banks and forcing people into big banks. Why? So that they can track and monitor you in these big banks with your social score. Your social credit score, okay, you'll be forced into a digital currency, and they'll force you either into their mark of the beast system, or they'll force you out of society where they'll make it unsustainable for you to live, because as they continue to pollute the air and dump chemtrails, they'll make it impossible for people to be independent and farm on their own and do these things. Plus, even if you can and you figure ways out around it, which there are, they'll come in with their military and they'll take you away. So they're pulling this in by 2030. There's a video up on my website too talking about private property ownership, another part of communism. Do you hear all the stories out there about people pulling in driveways, getting shot, people knocking on doors, getting shot? Most recently, the newest story, a guy's shooting in his backyard and someone comes over and says, stop shooting. So he goes, get off my private property. This is my property. And then he shoots them. See how this works psychologically? Because private property, there is none in communism. Now, most of these woke people out there don't know. Most of these liberals don't have a clue what's going on. They're just trying to be politically correct and be nice and be weak. And then they go, oh, you're a bully, raise your voice. Oh, you're a bully because you don't want to accept this in the schools and all this other nonsense. While they're destroying everything, telling you that everything the way it is bad, right? The Roe v. Wade thing, oh, that wasn't on purpose to rile people up to say we need to destroy the Supreme Court. They're trying to destroy the entire system, so they're doing all of these deliberate things. Then they're distracting you with things that don't matter. So people out there just going, oh, did you hear about all those people that just, are knocking on doors, randomly getting shot? We shouldn't even, not only should we not have people owning guns because it's dangerous, we shouldn't have private property either, because they think that if they own this property, they have the right to own a gun and they have the right to do whatever they want on their property. That's how this whole thing is working. That's on the website, those videos where I'm talking about it, because you can't talk about it here. So every piece and everything you can implement in a communist government is being implemented psychologically right now. They're planting seeds in every single direction. They're destroying the banks and the dollar. They're doing all of this stuff. This is communism. It is not wokeism. It's communism. And the kids out there don't even know what communism is. They're like, I don't know what that is. I'm woke. Oh, yeah. You don't know what communism is? Are you going to look forward to owning nothing? Are you going to look forward to sharing your home, sharing your wife, sharing your kids with a community? There's no such thing as a utopian society. Humans can't exist in a utopian society. Okay? Humans are flawed. It's not happening. But these imbeciles think that it is. And they think it's going to go that way when they start imprisoning people like us because we're mean and we don't accept and tolerate their disgusting perversions and everything else. But anyway, I'm going to rant off the topic. The banks are collapsing. People don't seem to understand. They are herding people into the big banks so they feel safer. right? Psychologically, oh my gosh, all these little banks are collapsing. They're going to continue to collapse. And they're going to herd you into the big banks, which have the ESG, which is pretty much, long story short, the carbon emission, the carbon footprint that you've heard about, where every single thing that you do is monitored and tracked. Where you buy from, if that company has a high carbon footprint, you can't buy X amount of things. You can't buy X amount of food. You can't drive X amount of miles. You can't leave your home and go outside for X amount of hours. It is total global enslavement. And everybody's sitting out there going, oh, you know what? Why don't you just let these people say that they can have babies? Hello? Is my mic on? Why do you think they're silencing people like me? They go, oh, they silence you because you're crazy and you're mean and you yell all the time. No, they silence because the truth will end their game. They'll end their plans because the people will not tolerate what they're really trying to do. But if they can continue to distract everybody and continue to say that anyone that speaks against the free press, which isn't a free press, the controlled press, and anyone that speaks this way or that way or has a tone in their voice, they're a detriment to society. They're dangerous. This is part of their plan, and we have to do everything we can to wake people up to what it is, and I'll do my best to continue to do that. I thank everyone for being here. Hope you're doing well. God bless you and your families.
You've ever had this